Cover on behalf of SDP the Public Contracts Scotland system, the electronic tendering system that you'll be using when the tender comes out. Some of you might be familiar with that already, but there might be others where this is quite a new system to get to grips with. So we shall have a quick look at that just on some slides. I'm going to talk about completing the single procurement document that Susan mentioned as part of her procurement presentation. This is the kind of standard qualification, if you like, this stage one of virtually all tenders now that come out. So there's a few areas there. I think the procurement team and probably the sort of transport team noticed that there were areas that suppliers had a few difficulties that didn't fill in properly last time. I'm going to cover as well the quality response, the technical response. So that's obviously where you get your scoring. And as Chris mentioned, it's likely that it would be a price-only tender, that there will be a quality element. So it's absolutely crucial to take account of how to get the best possible score. So hopefully that won't take too long, and I'll do a very quick demonstration live of Public Contracts Scotland, and in particular the module where this SPD document is kept. So Public Contracts Scotland, you'll get the slides once the presentations are all finished. So I've left the link in there for anyone who's not used that before. It's a single site. In Scotland, we're quite lucky, and it's where all tender opportunities for the public sector are advertised. So that's the site where you're going to actually get hold of the tender documents and spot the contract notice. So if you haven't already registered, you can do so very straightforwardly. It doesn't cost anything, and it's quite a simple form to fill in. So I would probably advise, if you haven't done that, just to already get started and put your registration through. And you obviously register as a supplier, not a buyer. Part of what happens once you register with PCS, you're taken through a process to set up what they call your alert profile. And that's where you can choose some keywords, and any tender, not just the East Lothian Council one, but anything else roundabout in Scotland from public bodies that links to your keywords will then be sent direct through to your email. So I'm guessing those of you who are registered are keeping a track of that. I think obviously this event was advertised through PCS as well. So make sure that your profile's got the right keywords. There are full training courses available on all the topics that we'll be covering in this quick overview. So again, the Using PCS is a full course that you'll be able to check on the events calendar. And it sounds like there's time to register and get these done. Extra training if you want it before the tender comes out. So how will you access the actual tender when it is published? So either it's going to come through your alert profiles as an email, and you might get lists. There's sometimes a tendency for people to miss live tender notices coming out. It simply gets caught up in your email. So quite often we would recommend that you use the Search the Buyer tab. If you know or you hear that the tender is about to be published, it's a very quick way to keep tabs on what East Lothian is putting out. So you click on Search the Buyer at the top, fill in East Lothian Council as the buyer organisation, and then search, and it'll come up with a link similar to one of these, which you would then click and go through to this screen. So this is the buyer profile. I've chosen one that's actually East Lothian Council unusually don't have any current contract notices on PCS at the moment. So this is from Scotland Excel, but I chose it because they have a bikeability contract notice there. But this is the sort of thing you'll see, and then you would then click on the link with the tender relating to East Lothian that you're interested in. Just as a bit of background information, you can use PCS to check out previous contracts. The prior information notice goes into this future contract, and you can use contract award or contract register to have a look and see, maybe it's either competitors, potential partners is another good search, just see who's been involved and won tenders in the past. So assuming you've found the link, you've clicked on it, it'll then open up with this view notice page. There's a short introduction here. It'll give you the deadline, importantly, and it will also here tell you that this is a previous version, but it would tell you if it has the online ESPD. The full notice text, I would encourage you to read through as well, because that's going to contain quite a bit of information relating to what they call the selection criteria. So, for example, insurance levels, if there were any, I don't know, sometimes buyers will set a sort of minimum turnover type thing. There'll be information, I believe there's a financial assessment that is carried out. So quite a lot of that you'll get first sight of it through the full notice text. It's also part of your bid no bid, and I think Chris as well alluded to that process, that obviously many of you will be interested in the opportunity, but you'll need to review it and assess whether you want to bid and in what capacity, if you want to be a main bidder or you want to be part of a group of bidders putting in for the services. So once you've read that full notice text, you can then click on record your interest, and it'll take you through a couple of screens, and it'll end up putting it into your interest list. And that, we'll see it in the live demo, but that sits in this suppliers area. So it'll come in looking like this, and then you can click on that to then go through. And what happens then is not just the notice that you saw previously, but you'll get the screen with the full details of the actual tender. So not just the full text element that we saw before, but you'll get a list of documents. Again, I think Susan gave a good overview of the types of documents you might expect. And there's a button for questions and answers. So importantly, as soon as the tender is published, you cannot contact the council team directly in relation to the tender to ask questions. You must go through the Q&A system. The Q&A system in general is published so that all bidders see all questions coming in. So you do need to publish anything you put out. We don't normally put your name in, for example. If it was something highly sensitive, commercially sensitive, you might need to submit a request that it wasn't distributed further, but that's something that Susan could comment on. But the most important bit is to get these documents. So this example that I've used here has got quite a big long list of different documents. Get them downloaded into the folder, and then before you start filling in any sort of forms or questionnaires, make sure that you've read all the details in all the documents. To be honest, that's normally where I would start highlighting areas, particularly for questions, because the deadline for questions usually finishes maybe a week before the tender. You must get them in as soon as possible. Okay, I'm just going to go, back up again. What you will find is that there might be a form that says single procurement document in this list here. But what you will have to do is to go to the post box and fill in the details online. You would only use the document if, for example, you had subcontractors or partners and they tend to have a shorter version to fill in. So again, that's something that might arise depending on the consortium, if that's your approach. Otherwise, the first part of the tender you're going to find here in the post box. This will be filled in already with your details, and it's this bit here, SPD Response, that you need to go to. You'll get the message to generate the response, and that will take you through to another window. It'll then give you an option, and we'll see this online, to actually create the response, and it's that create instruction that will open up the questionnaire. For any of you who are already feeling a bit concerned about this, please don't worry. The system is actually a bit easier to use than showing it in the slides, and you'll certainly get plenty of time and also help from SDP to actually use the system when it comes through. So this is the start of the SPD response. So it's a standard document, and you get instructions from the council against each question in terms of what they're looking for. So you'll get a number of tabs, and the first screen has these ones here. The first two, you don't need to touch at all, they'll be filled in. Company details will be fairly obvious. Representative details, we would tend to put in the senior business owner or partner, or if you like, the legally responsible person would put their details in there. So by clicking on the tabs or just filling in and then clicking on next, it'll take you through the different forms. So the structure, the bit that we looked at here in the first tabs was part 1, 2 and 3 largely. So part 1, as I say, the council will fill in. There's a part 2 which is important, and that's where you will be asked if you're bidding in collaboration as a part of a group, or if you have subcontractors. And there's a bit of odd terminology that talks about entities that you rely on and entities that you don't rely on. So again, you may have some questions through the process to just make sure that you understand whether, for example, if you were with a partner, that is someone who's going to deliver part of the services or the works. In general, that would be an entity that you rely on, and they would fill in a separate SPD. I'm trying to think of an example, but maybe a subcontractor that wasn't doing a critical part that you could possibly do in-house, or that you could have several suppliers doing the same thing. Possibly they wouldn't then fill in the SPD at that point. So part 2 has some of those sort of questions. Part 3 has quite a long list of questions which are all to do with legal compliance, but they're very straightforward in terms of response because they're all yes, no. It ranges from confirming that you're not involved in various types of criminal activity, including terrorism, I believe, trafficking, and so on. So they're the sort of mandatory exclusions. And then there's what they call discretionary. So it might be that you're asked if you've had any health and safety notices or sort of prohibition type or court cases. So sometimes those, if you've had something of that nature, or maybe an employee tribunal, you can say yes, but if you can show evidence of what you've done to deal with it and handle it, you can still move forward and be accepted. So we call them the yes-no questions, and there's 2 yes ones tucked in the middle about paying your tax and have you paid your social security. Part 4 is the area where some suppliers, not just for this type of tender, but certainly in our experience across the board, can sometimes have some problems. And this is really where these selection criteria come in. So it's very important to make sure that these are filled in properly. So you will get questions, and this will be on the portal, about financials, particularly turnover, and you may be asked to attach documents, or you may be asked just to self-certify and attach the documents at a later stage. Same for insurance, you'll be given the levels that are required. If you don't have that level of insurance, you don't need to buy it immediately, but you do need to commit to having it in place before the contract starts. So those 2 will definitely appear in the SPD for the council. There are others, tenders, where you might be asked for formal registrations and memberships. I'm thinking particularly some of the construction contracts that we would deal with for clients. Quite often they have to submit details there of formal membership or accreditation. So another one that's important highlighted here are the examples of relevant projects. I'm going to come on, I've got a separate slide for that, and we'll talk about what needs to be covered in those. And probably that is the biggest area where bidders fail to put in enough information to give good account of what they're doing. You might be asked, but I don't think you'll be asked in this one, about qualifications of your managerial staff or key team. But you will certainly be asked these final two questions about systems you've got in place for quality assurance and systems you have in place for environmental management. And in fact, I've missed off one there, health and safety systems. So again, this is all part of the stage one process to make sure that as a bidder, your organisation is suitable to be awarded the contract. You won't be scored particularly, it tends to be a sort of pass-fail at this stage one. So here's some suggestions for your relevant projects. You'll be told how many you need to present. Certainly in my experience, it tends to be 2 or 3 perhaps. But what you have to do, you'll obviously give details of maybe the client, their address, the key contact, sort of referee, if you like, person, the dates of the contract, the value. But under the description heading, there's a whole load of areas that we would encourage you to make sure that you include and really sort of tell the story of the project, and in particular why it's relevant to the tender going forward. So I would be looking to have a few keywords, particularly from the specification that goes with the tender. Maybe looking at some of the strategy documents that Chris had identified and see if there's anything in your other projects that you've done that show you've been working in a similar environment. So you can talk about obviously your staff, partners, subcontractors, give a nice clear list of what the actual activities were on the project and try not to have that buried in amongst all the text. Did you have any specific deliverables? And then key performance indicators. Did you sort of deliver on time, to budget, and so on? Then there's a whole sort of layer of what I would call maybe the more added value aspects, which I think can be quite important. So what were the challenges that you maybe overcame in the project, particularly if it's the sort of thing that might be relevant for this work? Was there any specialist work? Client communications, we have quite a few clients now who are using Teams, for example, so that people can share documents with your clients. And again, project management, what was put in place, particularly if it's a large, quite complicated project that you're bidding for, it's good to talk about that. Sustainability, environment, we're going to talk a little bit about that shortly. Any community benefits you delivered as part of the project, and then innovation. So it could be that something was done for the first time, that you developed, I don't know, an app or a new system, maybe as part of the project. So you might get some limitations on the size of this project description, but this is the sort of work you can already start to be preparing, because you will need this, and you will need it if you're bidding for other contracts as well. Quality management, there is a box to tick if you have ISO 9001. However, that can be quite unusual, particularly for smaller companies. So you need to be ready to explain what you have that's an internally managed, that you don't have someone from a third party coming in to assess it. And I think for most of us, we will have a quality management system in place. It possibly isn't called that, but here are some of the things that we would be looking for. I think in the SPD, you have to give an overview of what's in your quality management system, and then the council may come back and ask for examples of these documents. So I think most of these are fairly obvious, but the second bullet I think is important, and that is generally presented as a table. So we would go through what the different processes are in terms of delivery of your service or your products, and describe really for each stage what you do to make sure it's done properly. Who's responsible, and is there a kind of, I don't know, a related KPI? A very simple example is, somebody phones up, we answer the phone within 30 seconds, and who's responsible for that? The more complicated ones are to do with site inspections, for example, testing of materials and all that kind of thing. So again, good to start having some of these documents in place. Health and safety. So again, you'll want to be giving an overview of what you have in place, unless it could be that you have a recognised third-party health and safety system. I was thinking of things like Safe Contractor, for example, probably 2 or 3 others that are the class as SSIP, health and safety management systems. But if you don't, obviously you will need to have some form of written policy. I think technically, if you have 5 people and over, you're required that. Risk assessments, have a think about roles. Do you use external consultants? And I've mentioned a couple here that have free services. Training, and then obviously your reporting methods and so on, and tracking legal compliance. And the final one, which you'll come across in the SPD, is environmental management. So again, an overview of what your policy is in place if you don't have the ISO 14001 standard. I've mentioned Zero Waste Scotland here. I've just come across a tender recently that's asking suppliers to give evidence of their carbon footprint. So they're going to have to find a means of measuring that. So that might be something that you want already. I'm not sure if that will come up from the council, but I would certainly check out Zero Waste Scotland, again, providing free advice to SMEs. Be ready with a list of environmental measures that you might be using to try and reduce the impact. So obviously that's part of your system, but it could well be that there will be a question about sustainability where you'll be expected to come up with good information on that as well. Okay, so I'm conscious we're sort of dashing through, but I want to make sure that there's time available for the demo as well. But before I do, just wanted to highlight a few areas. Once you've submitted your online SPD, you'll then go back to the documents and there will be some form of questionnaire with the either within the invitation to tender or separately, but asking for your tender response. And this is the part that will be scored, and you'll get a document from the council that will tell you clearly which questions are scored and how much they're worth. So again, as a starting point, that's the kind of thing that you'll want to be looking at. So just emphasising again, please read all the documents under the tab before you start, and go through that process then of just making a note, and try and link, if you can, as you're reading through the specification, maybe terms and conditions, make sure that you link that information that you're capturing back into individual questions. I'm thinking if, for example, you get questions about project management and monitoring, probably somewhere in the terms and conditions there will be guidance on what's expected in terms of monthly meetings, quarterly reviews and so on. So you can usually glean a lot of good answers, relevant answers from these documents. When it comes to start to answer some of the questions, we would always recommend that you plan your response before you start. To be honest, I can often do this just handwritten, going through the notes, and I'll come up with maybe a list of bullet points in terms of what information I think I need to cover. So it's sadly a bit like exam technique, but it helps you avoid the situation where you maybe just start filling in lots and lots of words and you lose track of it, and it's very straightforward, easy rather, to miss out parts of a question, and your score will automatically be reduced. I'm just thinking, actually, I was looking at one from the last tender, and one of the questions, I think on operations and maintenance, has 4 quite clear different elements to it. So already I would be looking to have a sort of subheading and just to make sure that I've covered absolutely everything that's been asked in the question. It sounds really basic, it's not meant to be patronising, but it is literally what we see every day of the week as we're reviewing people's tenders, and they've just kind of sold themselves short by not covering the complex questions with enough detail. Keep to the word or the page limit. So again, I can see from the last time there's quite clear word limits. Some of them could be quite challenging. So there's maybe a 500 word answer, for example, that isn't a huge amount. So you maybe need to learn a technique for presenting your answer, maybe as bullet points or a kind of more of a note form. And then obviously the subheadings help. If you can, and if it's a Word document, you can use maybe tables to present some information, bullet points as well, and that helps for the readers of the document, that they can more clearly see what you've answered against each question. So I was thinking particularly for perhaps a skills matrix type table for your team, that table that I mentioned earlier for your quality control measures. So obviously it has to come within the word limit, but it can make it more readable. Quite a lot of the questions last time were based on what I would call a method statement approach. So you're being asked to outline certain procedures, describe how things will work, who are the people involved, and these are the ones that again really need quite a lot of focus. It's not good enough just to put in a short answer. You need to really tell the story. So, and it's very future focused. So this is all about what will you do once you win the tender. So what's the detail you want to write about? How are the activities going to take place? Who's going to do them? And is there a time aspect? So make sure that those questions are sort of covered for each of your responses. And please try and put yourself in the client's shoes. Again, we quite often see a lot of tenders that are all about me, or us. I've been looking at one for a very large global company in the recent weeks, and they had a tendency to put in what I would call very corporate, here's what we do, here's what we offer. You very much need to reverse that and put yourself in the council's shoes and say, well, what would they see as added value in my answer? So I'd say don't be too concise, but obviously with your writing style, try not to, we've called it a little bit waffly details. Some things are like, we believe that we are a high valued, people-centered, thing. So these are all quite what I would call opinion type statements. You really need to pin everything back to just evidence, nuts and bolts, and good kind of data, if you like, to back up any statements like that. Some people have a natural writing style that maybe is a bit flowery, so it's good to have a review to make sure that you cut out any unnecessary words. Don't cross-refer to other responses. So I think, again, you'll be given instructions about that. So each question has to stand on its own merits. And don't include any web links. These wouldn't be looked at. I've added some sources of help just at the end there. So for some of the healthy working lives, the Supplier journey is quite useful. So that's a Scottish Government site. So that can help as well to give you some background if you're looking for some training generally on tendering as well. Okay. I'm going to just come out to Elizabeth just now I'll stop. Okay, so I'll just get the box out of the road. So as I say, I'm conscious probably a lot of you are already registered for PCS, so I'm not going to go through a big sort of long demo of the login and registration because it is very straightforward. This is the search the buyers tab, and normally I'm just going to put in Orkney in this one because I've got a tender that I know I want to pick up to show you as a demo. So search for buyers. Let's see if I can find the one, which I think is this one here. So this is the buyer profile I talked about, and this is the current contract notices where you would expect to see the list. So the East Lothian one will look exactly like this. I'm going to choose this one because you can see, because of that logo with the little key there, I know it's a postbox type tender submission, so it's all going to carry on within the PCS platform. So click on this. Normally I'd be reading the text, but I'm just going to record my interest. So it asks me to log in again. So register an interest. I'll click save. I think it will probably say that I've already registered, so that's fine. So I'll continue, and then it goes into my interest list, which unfortunately is very large because we're working on lots of different tenders at any one time. So I'll just run down and find. This is the one here that I want to take a closer look at. So I've got the notice details, I've got the documents, I've got the Q&A, which I could use if I want to start putting in questions, but I'm going to go straight just now to the post box and show you how to get into the SPD. So again, I've got quite a lot of list of post boxes opened, but it's this one here. Normally it will have something that says create, because if you go in for the first time, but because I've been in already, it's asking me to click on edit dispatch. We've got some contact details at the top, and then rather than generate response, I've started it already, so I'm just going to go into edit. The PCS system can be quite slow, by the way, if any of you are just starting to use it. So you have to sometimes sit and wait for it to go through. Okay, so here's the first screen. And we can literally just go through either tab by tab or just click on next to go through. So I'm going to miss out the first two because they will be filled in by the buyer. The company details are all basic here. You can just fill them in if there's anything missing. I'm already filled in myself as a supplier representative. If you haven't, you'll click on that link and do that. Here's our little wait signal, sadly. Okay, so this is us on to the next step 2, the selection criteria answers. And there's 4 tabs here, and all 4 areas here will need to be filled in before you can submit it. You can, as you're going through, save and exit and just go in and out of the SPD. So it's not, you don't have to fill it all in at once. So this one is just a statement. Sometimes there's a question underneath that, but this time it's blank. This bit of information is the area where I mentioned about working in consortium. So there's a few questions about, are you an SME? It asks if you're a supported business. That is generally a business that has 30% or more disabled or disadvantaged employees. So it tends to be the kind of re-employ type organisation. So normally just say no to that. There's a question on this one about an official list, which I think probably won't apply because you're UK. There's an odd question about contribution certificates. Nobody's been able to tell me where this comes from, but this is a good example of what you have to do for these yes/no ones. So you have to say either yes or no. And this one, it asks if you want to upload the information at this point. You can either say no, if you think it will be asked for later. If you say yes, it'll open up a box and allow you to do that. If you don't press either button here, the SPD won't submit. So you may find when you get to the end, it says it can't go through and you've missed out something. It could be that you've missed out one of these yes, no buttons at the bottom. It's not a particularly well designed system in that respect. So here's a question about the group and consortium. So if you said yes to that, then you would download the separate SPD document here. This is the one about reliance on other entities. It's a pretty horrendous wording. So the first one is generally about a proper consortium joint venture. This one might be more that you've got a sort of subcontractor partner type. And then the third one is where it's more a straightforward subcontractor, but you're not relying on them, if you like. Okay, so although this all looks like a bit of a horrendous form, you can go back in and out of this and just fill it in as you go through. The exclusion one in particular, I'll just show you one of the questions here, but it's exactly the same format. So have you been found guilty of the offence of conspiracy? So you'd obviously say no to that and then no to the uploading and carry on through. There's quite a few sections in this one, so you just keep clicking on the next button to take you through to the end of that section. So the final one, this is the part 4 area. And again, I'll just very quickly show you this. So the questions you will get will be decided by the council. So here you can tab your way down the left. So you won't get one on suitability. You won't get one on turnover, I believe, but you'll have a financial check to fill in. And there's questions here on insurance. So you would fill that in, they would give you the amount, and you just say you could commit or you can commit. You either have the insurance or you can commit. And this is the one with the relevant examples. I tend to, here you can add in the descriptions and it just adds into the spot here, but it's not particularly useful. So I would tend to fill that in to say, please see attachment below. And then below in this bit, I would say yes, and then have a separate document with my project files, particularly if you want to put photographs and so on. Okay, so as you're going through this one, let me just go back up to the top. The technical and professional ability, you'll just keep going through there, but at the moment it's going to be only the procurement, the relevant examples, and then you'll get these questions. One here, and it'll be quality and health and safety probably. And you say yes if you have the ISO, and if you say no, then you have a short box there. I think it's 10,000 characters actually, just to give the overview what you do have. And there is the opportunity. At that point, the council can come back. There's nowhere here where you can upload your alternatives, if you like. Okay, so one for quality, health and safety, one for environmental, same format, and you're then ready. If I just attempt then now, this out the way. Oops, sorry, I need to go to the right to the end of the next, at the end of environmental, takes me to, it'll come up with the summary. Okay, so the summary is useful. So you can obviously, there's opportunities to print these, but this will come up and highlight in red if there's anything that you've missed. So the concluding statement is crucial. You've got to put your name in and tick the box at the bottom. And then if I go ahead and save and exit, if everything's filled in the SPD, normally that would do a save and lock, which is this one here. Here it says you can save only, but there's still, obviously I've not filled it in, so there's quite a lot needing completed. Okay, so we're back in the post box. I can go back in and edit my SPD, or if I've finished it, then I'll go back into my interest area and pick up the documents and complete all the rest. If I just go back out to postbox responses again. So once the SPD is finished, you're then going to this part of Public Contract Scotland to upload all your documents. So your tender response, there might be some official certificates in form of tender type thing. So you give it a name, choose a file. I'm not sure if this is actually showing here, and then add your document. And that will show up here. So you just continue to do that. And then once you're ready, either save and exit, because you're going to come back, or you can dispatch, which is when you're ready to submit. Okay, so I'm very conscious that's been a very fast run through the PCS system, but there is training available through SDP, and generally sort of simple queries on the system itself. Elizabeth and the team are usually very good at answering if anyone's absolutely stuck. I'll hand back now if there's